All right, this is Dylan here with you downtown Toronto, and we're out on the town. I'm going to be answering some questions that you guys dropped in. So stay tuned, watch this video, and I'm definitely going to get to some important questions. All right, let's do this.
So what made you start Mindwalk in the first place?
Really, it just came from me being an athlete and having to live those experiences. You know, I know what it's like. I spent so much time as an athlete just giving everything that I could into training and showing up to different competitions. And the most frustrating thing was knowing that I was always just as ready physically for each competition, for each tournament, but my results were drastically different. Like sometimes I would do amazing and sometimes it would go really south, and my skill had always stayed the same, but mentally, you know, those little lapses had let me down. So I had lived that life so many times for so many years, and I'd recognized that, you know what, this is a really important thing that, you know, athletes need to really take advantage of, is working on the mental game.
As a former national team athlete, what lessons do you still use every day, like in business and in life?
I think the big one is not cutting corners, because no one's going to do the work for you. Like, there's nobody to pick up the slack. I think that's something that carries over between being a high performance athlete and also in business, is like, if you're not doing the work, it's just not getting done. You can't rely on someone to pick up that slack. So I think that's one thing that really translates over well, is knowing that you need to be independent, you need to be self-reliant, and you need to be the one that's putting the work in, because if you're cutting corners, it's only going to come back to bite you in the ass.
When did you realize that the mental game mattered more than physical training?
I think I realized when I started to see how exceptional all athletes were at the highest level. I think when you get to like a world championship, pro, Olympian level, there's not enough variance anymore in terms of skill. Everyone's going to be dynamic, everyone's strong, everyone's flexible, everyone's technical. So really the difference maker at the highest level is always going to be the mental game, because the improvements get they're a lot more marginal on the physical side. On the mental side, it's, you know, how are we able to execute on the skill that we've got? So I think that's the most critical part about the mental game, especially at a high level where everyone is an exceptional athlete. It's who's able to execute on the skill that they've been building. That's who we really see find success at the top, because, you know, that's the biggest difference maker that I'm seeing.
What's the biggest mental block you see athletes struggling with?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of what ifs going on, especially around training and competition. I think as an athlete, you know, the more results focused we are, the more it causes you to worry about the what if. And my answer to that is always to think about not just the what if, but what can I do? So instead of saying, well, what if I don't make weight if I'm a fighter? It's like, well, what can I do? I can make sure that I'm super regimented with my nutrition and my diet plan. That's what I can do to give myself the best shot that I can. Or what if I gas out when I'm competing? Well, what can you do is you can really work on your cardio and your endurance so that you're giving yourself the best possible chance to compete at a high level. So if you catch yourself thinking about what ifs, which I think is a big mental block for athletes, is the what if kind of anxiety game, turning that into, well, what can I do about that?
What do you think is the difference between arrogance and confidence in athletes?
I think the difference comes down to preparation, right? I think confidence comes from preparation. True confidence comes from preparation. I think that's really the only difference. You can say almost anything that you want if you've prepared for it and you've earned the right to say it, or I guess that's how I define it. Like, that's how you've earned the right to say it, because you've prepared. I consider that confidence. If you have done none of the preparation and you're just saying it to say it, I think it's arrogant, because, you know, what makes you think that you can go out there and do these amazing things without even putting in the work and preparing? So, you know, the difference for me between confidence and arrogance is, you know, the preparation that we have that allows us to go out there and actually fulfill the thing that we say we're going to go out there and do.
Why do you think athletes focus on training their bodies, but they never focus on training their minds and their mental?
I think it's just not mainstream yet. I think we're going to get to a place in a few years where it definitely is popular and mainstream. I think it's just kind of early days for it. I think every industry kind of has that moment of time where it hasn't hit yet. I think like nutrition, strength and conditioning, physiotherapy, like these are all very common, popular things now that at a certain point back in the day, people just weren't taking advantage of. But the ones that were, they had like the most benefit from it, because, you know, it was still kind of like under the radar. So if you had a nutritionist before it was popular, you know, the amount that you had to gain from that was a lot. So I think that's kind of where we're at in terms of mental training and the mental game. Is down the line, I think in a few years we're getting there where it's going to be very popular and mainstream and everyone works with a, you know, mental coach. But for now, the ones that are doing it, I think, get the most value out of it, and they're going to get the best results because it's just something that their competitors are likely not doing. So I think it just comes down to what's mainstream, and I think we're trending to get there, but it's just not there yet in terms of what's popular.
What's the best thing an athlete can do if they're nervous before a big game or a big moment?
I think it's important to come up with something like a strategy that you can use. 5 seconds to go. I think a lot of mental skills are great in when you have a lot of time. I always like to come up with something that we could use in the moment, and one of my favorite exercises for that is like a 3-word mantra. You know, coming up with like, what are the core 3 words that we could use to define the performance we're about to go in there and give.
You're talking about a 3-word mantra, right? What do you think's a nice 3-word mantra that athletes can use?
I think something actionable, right? Something like confident, strong, fast. It could be a mix of mental and physical. It could be dynamic, explosive, having fun. Like coming up with, I like to have 3 words, something bite-sized that we can use in that moment, whether it's between rounds, right before we step out there onto the field, you know, anything that we're about to do, giving yourself that like 3-word actionable step prompt. And what I think it allows you to do is just kind of like prime yourself to think of not just what you want to be doing, but how you need to really bring that to life.
Why do you think athletes put so much pressure on themselves, and why do you think that pressure makes them fail?
I think a lot of pressure comes from focusing too much on the outcome, right? We're always very outcome related, results oriented, and anytime we're focusing on kind of the final result of what we're about to do, instantly that adds the pressure of, well, what if I don't? What if I fail? What if I'm not able to do that? So with high expectations also comes that standard, and it can cause a lot of pressure, which is why for me, I always like to bring it back to what's the process, right? What are the steps to success instead of just success itself? Instead of thinking about what you want to make, it's like, what's the recipe I need to follow with the ingredients that I have to make the thing as kind of a natural byproduct? So a lot of pressure comes from those high expectations, which are good, but you just don't want those expectations to be around the result. We want to focus on those steps to success and the process, really.
What do you think's the number one habit that high achievers have that separates them from regular people?
Honestly, I think it's optimism. And you know, maybe that sounds boring, but when you look at high achievers, you have to be able to have an optimistic outlook on life, because no matter who you are, things are always going to get tough. You're always going to take L's, you know, you're always going to run into problems and fail. And if you're not optimistic, you're just going to quit the moment it gets tough. So I think you have to be able to have a positive frame on the world and the situations that you're in, and trust that no matter how bad it is now, it can get better. So when you look at high achievers across all industries, it's that true optimism, not that toxic positivity that people are getting into now, but that true optimism that I think keeps you in the game. And as long as you stay in the game, you can't really fail.
How do you stay disciplined when you don't have any motivation or when motivation drops?
I think for me, a big thing is like, I know that motivation is gonna dip sometimes, so I don't try to avoid mistakes altogether because I know it's inevitable. I try to contain them, right? So if I have like a bad day, or what I would consider a bad day, like I'm okay with it. I don't kind of dwell too much, but I try not to let that snowball into another one and another one. I think that happens a lot, where we let kind of one bad moment snowball. So let's say I want to go to the gym and I skip it. Like, that's okay once, but I try to make sure that I'm for sure there the next time, or else it'll snowball into more. So I try to have a little bit more discipline than rely on motivation, especially when motivation is really finicky.
What do you think is one skill every entrepreneur should have?
I think it's to be one skill every entrepreneur should have. I think it's the skill of being able to reframe. I think if you can reframe things, especially with your self-talk, then you're able to take any negative situation and flip it into a positive. I think no matter what you do, no matter what industry you're in, if you could be a master of reframing, taking something that feels negative, taking something that feels a bit like an L, and twisting it and pivoting it into something stronger and something positive, I think that's an enormous skill that all of us can do a little bit better at, is that reframing of negative self-talk. So if you can have that skill of being able to reframe things mentally, I think that's a skill that everybody should be sharpening.
Why do you think consistency and routines matter more than motivation?
I like to treat motivation like an emotion, like being happy or being frustrated. It's something that comes and goes. It's really volatile, right? You know, I'll watch a TikTok at midnight and get really pumped up and really motivated, and then, you know, set my alarm early the next day just to, you know, have that alarm go off. And that motivation is gone and I don't feel like doing it anymore. So, for me, motivation is an emotion that kind of comes and goes. I think discipline, system, structure, routine, that's what holds you to what you said you were going to do when you were motivated, even when that feeling's gone.
What's a big myth about mental performance that you want to bust?
One myth is that you only need mental training if you're struggling with something. That's for me a huge myth, because sure, there's a lot of people who come into something like this and they have problems or issues or concerns they want to address. For me, it's always about how can you take something that you might naturally be really strong at and make it even sharper, right? You look at all athletes, you would never say that on the physical side, right? You would never look at a quarterback who's got an amazing throw and say, well, you've got a good arm, why even work on your throw anymore? Why not work on other stuff? It's like, well, if you've got a naturally great throw as a quarterback, imagine what that could look like if you added the right technique to it, if you added the right training and guidance. So that's how I like to look at mindset, is like, if you're naturally tough, you're naturally confident, you're naturally motivated, that's amazing. And what could that look like if we shaped it and we sharpened it and we really molded it into, what that peak potential could look like?
What's a piece of advice you'd give your younger self about mindset, about performance? Because you said you used to be a national champion, right? So what's something that you would give that younger self? What advice would you give?
Honestly, I would say a big piece of advice, if I can go back, is just saying, stay the course, right? I think that applies to kind of all parts of my life and probably most people, whether it's sports or business or school or whatever it is. Like, things are going to get tough. I think that's kind of a theme that we run into a lot of the time. It's not about avoiding the problems as they come, but kind of managing them and staying the course. And I think that's just a good piece of advice, is no matter what you're going through, even though you want to quit or you might want to pivot or find a new path, you won't regret staying the course and just finishing what you started, because it's really tough. It's really tough to go back, and some things you can't. So that would be kind of my piece of advice, is whatever you're going through, stay the course and see what's waiting for you on the other side. All right, well, that was me answering some questions out on the town. Drop something below. If you thought of something that came to mind that I didn't get to, drop a question, leave a comment, send me a DM, and I'll make sure to get to it next time. The next time we get this series going of Out on the Town.